Mirror Neurons 101, featuring empathy. What are mirror neurons anyways? Do they activate when we look in mirrors? Or are they some kind of reflective brain cell? Actually, they're neither of these. According to the APA, mirror neurons are a type of brain cell that responds equally when we perform an action and when we witness someone else perform the same action. For example, take Marvin the monkey. This is his friend, Maggie the monkey. As monkeys, both Marvin and Maggie love bananas. When Marvin sees Maggie holding a banana, certain mirror neurons begin to respond as if he himself were actually holding the banana. As you can imagine, because of their ability to connect action and perception, mirror neurons are thought to be involved in higher-order cognitions like empathy or even the development of language. A brief history. Mirror neurons were first discovered by Italian researcher Giacomo Rizzolatti at the University of Parma. He and his colleagues had been examining area F5 in monkeys and noticed something curious. There were certain neurons that fired both when the monkey picked up a peanut and when the experimenter picked up a peanut to hand to the monkey. Even more intriguing, these neurons appeared to be action-specific. For instance, a neuron that fired for a grasping action would not fire for a tearing action, and vice versa. Rizzolatti and his colleagues decided to call these unique neurons mirror neurons. The path to finding mirror neurons in humans has not been as easy. Studies recording single neurons are not as common in humans, since we can't ethically attach electrodes directly to the brain. Though we have yet to find evidence for individual mirror neurons, several studies involving fMRI suggest that humans have mirror systems that essentially act the same way as monkeys' mirror neurons. In other words, they activate both when we perceive an action and when we do the same action ourselves. Types of mirror neurons. Mirror neurons can be broken into two groups. About 1/3 of mirror neurons are considered strictly congruent, whereas 2/3 of mirror neurons are considered broadly congruent. In order to activate, strictly congruent neurons require their coded action to be identical to the action observed. On the other hand, broadly congruent neurons do not require the observed and coded actions to be identical. For example, a strictly congruent mirror neuron that codes for a grasping motor action will only be activated by observing grasping actions. A broadly congruent mirror neuron that codes for grasping motor actions could be activated by actions other than grasping. Circuitry of mirror neurons. In Rizzolatti's original paper, he and his colleagues proposed a circuit involving the rostral part of the inferior parietal lobule and the ventral premotor cortex. A 2007 paper by Rajmohan and Mohandas updated this circuitry to include the superior temporal sulcus and area F1. In their proposed pathway, sensory input moves from the superior temporal sulcus to the inferior parietal lobule. From there, axons send information to area F5. From F5, information is passed on to F1 to be expressed as motor output. Now that we've covered the basics, let's dive into some of those higher-order concepts like empathy. Empathy is the ability to step into another's shoes, to understand and share their feelings from their point of view. Not only does it promote equality by allowing us to humanize the other, but, according to Dr. Hepper at the University of Surrey, empathy actually acts as the social glue that helps personal relationships and social bonds to form, develop, and endure. You might be surprised to learn that empathy only entered the English vocabulary about a century ago. Researchers trying to find a translation for the German word Einfühlung decided to use the word empathy, derived from the Greek empathia. Though psychologists suggested many theories in the decades that followed, it wasn't until the 1990s and the discovery of mirror neurons that we had any proof of a neural basis for empathy. If you remember from earlier, mirror neurons activate both when we perceive an action and when we perform the same action ourselves. Since empathy essentially requires us to feel what another person feels, it's not a huge leap to think that the two might be connected. In fact, numerous researchers have conducted studies that seem to suggest a connection between mirror neurons and empathy. For example, Schultz-Ruther and his colleagues were interested in finding out what neural mechanisms were involved in the evaluation of our own emotions versus the emotions of others. They had participants undergo an fMRI while viewing faces showing emotion. In the self task of the experiment, participants were asked to focus on their own emotional response to the facial stimuli. In the other task of the experiment, participants were instead asked to evaluate the emotion shown by the facial stimuli. Schultz-Ruther and colleagues found that the areas of the brain activated in the other task were the same areas involved in mirror systems. Other studies have explored the potential connection more from the mirror neuron side of things. Valeria Gazzola and her colleagues were using fMRI to examine the potential existence of auditory mirror neurons. As part of their data collection, they tested individuals on where they fell on an empathy scale. In support of a connection between mirror neurons and empathy, they found that participants who scored higher on the empathy scale activated their proposed mirror system more strongly. Of course, both of these studies should be taken with a grain of salt. Neither involved many participants, and both involved the use of fMRI. Though pretty to look at, fMRI results are hard to interpret because you can't really tell if there's any causal relationship between activated brain areas. All you really know is that there's correlation between them. And if STEM classes at William & Mary teach you one thing, it's that correlation does not equal causation. To sum up, since their discovery in the 1990s, mirror neurons' ability to connect perception and action have made them the focus of much speculation. Though there is some evidence that they play a role in empathy, more studies that both replicate results and investigate the exact nature of this relationship will need to be conducted.